How's you going?
Yeah, so we are we're streaming now.
Okay, I'd just like to call this meeting to order. This is the first finance meeting of the new triennium, so I'd like to welcome you all to that. I just want to start with the whakikoki, Tui tu te whenua, whatonaro naro te tangata. It's the Maori whakikoki, which says the land will remain after people have disappeared. So what we have got, we have to manage for our time and for the generations to come. I'd like to welcome the Port Otago men, Kevin, Tim, Pat and Stephen. We're looking forward to your presentation today. But look, we'll just go through the apologies first. We have Brian Scott, an apology, and Alexa is going to be late. We don't have any other apologies, I don't think, Liz. So we also have a spot for a public forum, which is there's no one coming for that. So we have to make a resolution.
Move in second.
Oh, for the apologies. Yeah, we so move. Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Right.
Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. As far as I see, there's nothing there that needs to change. If there's anyone who would like any change to the agenda, please say so. All right, we'll stick with what we've got. Port Otago. Otago Regional Council's total assets are $964 million, of which 700 roughly million are the Port Otago. So you guys are at our biggest asset. In fact, you're 72% of our balance sheet. We received a dividend from you, and last year I think that was around about $13.6 million. We're really interested in the activities and the forecasts for the port, and so really looking forward to your report. Not only are you our largest asset, you're an incredible asset for this province. The exports that you shift out of the port and the imports that you bring in are substantial. So you are very important in every aspect. So I'm looking forward to what you guys have to say. So who's going to kick off? Tim. Okay, over to you.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. And I've met all of the councillors, and I think Michael's on the screen, and I know Michael well. So morning, Michael. So my name is Tim Gibson. I'm the chair, effective from the 1st January of Port Otago, and took over from Paul, who, as you know, retired, and big shoes to fill. So it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here today representing Port Otago. And I think your opening whakatau was actually very apt in terms of the way we view this port. What we do, we're stewards of the port for today. Those who came before us made substantial investments and made decisions which have given us, all of us in this room and everyone in the region, an asset to be proud of. And we're very mindful that we need to continue that tradition to make sure that those who come in the future will continue to benefit from that asset which has been built. So as you indicated, Chair, I'm joined this morning on my right is Kevin, very well known to all of you, Pat, equally well known, and Stephen. So what we will do this morning is Kevin will just start with a very high-level review of the year, half year to date. We'll then talk about our financial performance. I will cover aspects of that. Then talk about some of our key projects, outlook for the remainder of the year, and then open it up for Q&A. But I just seek your guidance, Chair. How do you feel about questions as we talk, or is your preference to people to hold their questions, unless they're clarification, until the end of the session? We're relaxed either way.
I quite like the discussion process. So if anyone has any questions during, if you're happy with that, absolutely, we can just ask them.
Thank you. I'll pass to Kevin to get us going.
Technology works, Morena. Just always at Port, we start with safety first. It's the most important thing, our business, keeping our people safe. So we continue to invest in our safety culture. It's been a long journey for us. And, you know, the focus of this last 6 months has been exciting as we've rolled out a new safety leadership program for our staff. So we've been training our leaders and our safety reps. And we have a RUNAPA, which is a safety council. We had it on Monday. We have our directors join that, and our leaders and our safety reps come together. And it was really exciting to hear two of our workers, our safety reps, come up with a couple of projects that they've delivered for the business. And that sort of ground roots engagement and driving the business forward is exactly what we want. So the investment for us is all about upskilling our people, still supported by looking at critical risks and having soft controls converted into hard engineering controls. So we continually review our risks, and whether it's physical barriers or it's looking to re-engineer how we do the work to remove that interaction between people and machinery. It's a big issue in our business. So it will be a continual focus. You'll hear me bang on about it every year because we won't fix it over 6 months. It's just an ongoing process. But we've got good engagement, and it feels like we're starting to make a real sort of difference at a ground roots level. So it's not all about us, it's about our team. So it'll be an ongoing process, but pleased with where we're going. Shipping, you've probably read heaps about shipping in the media, starting to quieten down a wee bit. So this is not my typical slide. I used to show you the global shipping reliability slide. And I haven't seen the latest one, but global shipping's actually become more reliable. So the international trade routes are east to west. They're the big ships going point to point. Due to just demand slowing down between Europe, China, and the US, all of that capacity is still available. So effectively, there's not so much constraint in those east-west trades. So it's all starting to free up. So becoming more reliable, and shipping pricing has fallen out of bed. So it's got back to pre-COVID levels. So the shipping lines have had a couple of years of really making hay, and now it's back to a more normal level. It takes a while to flow down to New Zealand. We're a long way away from east-west trades. So we've still got some issues to roll through to us, and it's become more localised and bottlenecked rather than, in fact, a global shipping issue. So there you've got a couple of slides there. The top one's Auckland, and the one underneath is Tauranga. The little dots that's the queue to get into the port. And if you see Auckland is, 12 queued up to get into the port. So every day a ship's waiting maybe 50,000 US a day. So that's the sort of waste in the system. And it's just hard to then manage your workforce when you've got peaks and troughs. So until those sort of big ports in New Zealand actually change the capacity and be able to manage that flow is a wee bit more settled, we're still going to see a lumpy shipping profile at our end. And the good thing with us, we're at the bottom end of New Zealand. We've got 4 ships. I'll talk about a new shipping line. We used to have 3 ships a week, so it's quite easy for us to juggle, and we've been used to it for years. So it's business as usual, really, but we'd like it to get a little bit more reliable. And we think later in the year it might get more reliable, as in the ships per what day of the week they come. So I think, well, in another year we won't be talking about this. So it feels like we're through the worst of it. Exciting return of cruise. This was as at 31st of December. We had 31 cruise ships through, about 54,000 passengers at that stage. We've had 84 cruise ships through now today. We've got 19 to go. We've had 6 cancellations. So we couldn't be happier with the restart. It's been fantastic for our community. So at the end of the year, we might have circa 200,000 passengers through. And it's looking like it's going to be quite a successful season for us. There's been some teething problems with lack of bus drivers throughout the network, and that's just not here, that's everywhere. And we were talking to a master of one of the cruise vessels in port yesterday, and he's experienced it all over the world. So it's the same issue. It feels like it's getting better every day. So I'd expect through the winter and the restart of cruise next year, we'll be well prepared. And some of these issues we're having, localised issues, we should be able to manage those better. Still going to take a bit of work with us, and that's us working together to make sure we can deliver that.
Sorry, just ask, in terms of the schedule, the bottleneck is February for cruise ships, is it or not?
Yes, it's still, it's becoming, this season is more bottlenecked in Jan, Feb. And the selling tours around that high summer period. we do have to work with the cruise lines over time to get that shoulder spread out if we can. That would make it a wee bit smoother. And there's plenty of capacity. We've just got to work with the cruise lines. But that's what we've got in front of us this year. Now, this year was restart. That's the way to look at it. But really happy with it. Our team's done a phenomenal job. We kept our cruise staff right through the pandemic. So proud we did. And they've made a hell of a difference. So our team's done a great job.
Kevin, what sort of progress have you made with New Zealand Rail around, the transport between Dunedin and the port?
Well, obviously, you've got the cycleway being constructed, and hopefully it's going to be completed mid-year. And that it's very close to the railway line. So they've had an extra sort of health and safety risk in the last 12 months, made it hard for them to get the Torrey Gorge train right down onto the port. They've committed to work with us to get it back there for the next season. So I think we all have to work with Kia Rail to enable that to happen, because you take 300 passengers straight off the port. They get out of Dodge. It means there's, how many buses less than, 6 buses less. It's freed up to do other stuff. It's common sense. We just got to make it work. Okay.
Could I just ask you, do you always line up when the boats come in like that?
No, we did that for the first one.
Just for the photo.
Yeah, we asked the staff to come out, and we were surprised as we got nearly all the staff out that day, waving flags, and it's great fun. And the crew and passengers just loved it.
Yeah.
But we only did it once. It didn't stop the business.
Would you like to join us?
It was pretty cool. For those who haven't visited Tauroni Beach, you need to. It's a beautiful facility. So we're really proud of the work we've done there. The beach is looking in good shape. While we've stopped pumping and we've got the sand up onto the beach, it's not done yet. We've got to watch it settle. We've got to monitor it. Then we've got to figure out how to get it shaped the right way and what nature's going to do to it through the winter, and then go back and do it again. So it's not done, but we've done a lot of the legwork. In saying that, it's been well utilised by the community and the wider community through the summer, which has been amazing. So pretty happy with where we're going there. The reserves coming along, so the DCC's really got cracking, and it's been we were on site there this week, and the children's playgrounds in and being constructed, so that's looking pretty exciting. But we still have to acknowledge Des and the team there. It's their work that's got us to this stage, and really proud to be able to support them and deliver it. And when we've got it all sorted and the reserve's amazing, and we're confident with the beach, we'll definitely have a celebration down there.
Tim was asked, given the issue with the erosion on the northern end of the first groin, that makes sense.
Southern end of the last groin.
Oh, there was a well, at the
Yeah, sorry. Whichever
You know what you mean.
the southern end is.
I'm sorry. So obviously you've been down and had a visit or whatever. What is the thought from Warataga's perspective going forward?
Yeah, obviously, the beach takes a while to settle. That when we explained that to the community, and that was our advice right from the start, that you can't look at it on the first day and say that's what it is. And nature will take a while to settle down. So there's been some sand deposited to the southern end, and there's about 4 or 5 properties there that have rock walls, and the rock walls have moved around a bit, and probably will continue to for the next 12 months as the winter storms and we get back to replenish the sand. So we're working with the community to work our way through that, and clearly we'll understand what we can do in due course, but early days. Okay.
Andrew, was it, were you referring to the public forum yesterday?
No, this was it was in the ODT about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yep.
Given another with some luck down there.
Yeah. Okay. So go down and have a look on a nice day, not on a poury rain day like yesterday. We continue to support the community just as we can, and you'll see lots of containers floating around the town pop up. It's a popular request to see if we can support a club or a community with a container, which we do. And then we've got our key sort of sponsorships looking after the water sports, our harbour, people connected to the harbour, Eco Century, wildlife. So just a continual program. and looking forward to over time developing, more support for communities as they come forward and ask for support. So we get lots of people walking in the door.
I think you should add, the containers, we don't have a store of unused containers. We actually have to buy them and then refurbish them. So it's not just us going into the warehouse and picking out a spare empty container. So there is a cost, but it's worth doing.
As I said earlier, we used to have 3 calls a week. You're really happy to have Zim Lion calling at Port Chalmers. A bit of work the last 12 months to work with them and some of our customers to bring Zim to us. Zim's an Israeli shipping line, a lot of new ships, so they got good gear. And they came into Australia and then they started coming across to Tasman and they're just quietly establishing themselves in this part of the world. So we've got a fortnightly service to start with, and as they build capacity and customer set, that will effectively, hopefully go to a weekly service. But at the moment it's fortnightly, started well. The great thing about the service is it's like any customer, it's always good to have choice. When you come to Port Chalmers and you've got a choice of shipping lines, this just provides another option and it goes through to our customer set for them to have choice. So really pleased to have them here and it'll be good for us in the long term.
So if we could move on to the financials. Thank you for that, Kevin. It's been a pleasing first 6 months of the year. Our profit of 9.2 million after tax compares very favourably with the same period last year of 6.5 million. I think the profit improvement just re-emphasises the approach we take to the business. So we have 4 key pillars to the business: container, bulk, cruise and property. And when they're all firing on all cylinders, we do particularly well, but also it gives us a risk mitigation if and when one of those areas or more than one of those areas is affected for reasons outside of our control, as we have seen in the last 2.5 years with COVID, which has caused some disruption and of course just stopped the cruise business dead in its tracks. So now that things are returning to normality, and let's hope it continues, we're pretty comfortable that our strategic approach and most importantly flowing from that our operational performance is solid and it's a good return to profitability compared to prior years over the first 6 months, and it does show the importance of that cruise business to our activities. Marine and cargo services, and Kevin will go into the divisional breakdown in more detail shortly. Our marine and cargo services we're up about 29%. And that reflects a modest increase in container activity of about 5% and ongoing strength, particularly in the forestry sector. Our property remains solid. We've had a 10% increase in terms of our rental income to just on $16.7 million for the first 6 months. And that's also a very important part of our ongoing strategy to ensure that we have a growing and secure rental income stream to offset challenges around the day-to-day operations of the port. I should add that sitting in behind the numbers are the numbers, but they are based very much on our people and our culture. And this year, in the first 6 months, we're very pleased that we have made good progress with our people and culture. Kevin has touched on health and safety. We've introduced a health and safety leadership program, which is really starting to pay benefits and reinforces our culture of mates looking after mates. And we've also developed and implemented a self-service learning management system to encourage and support all of our team to build their skills and capabilities in the business, both for their current jobs and for future jobs. But go to the next slide, please. I guess the balance sheet, Chair, is what you touched on earlier, our significance to the Regional Council. So our gearing is conservative, just on 80%. We're not embarrassed about having a conservatively geared balance sheet. We think it's important given the nature of our business. We are an infrastructure business. We're capital intensive, and we have to strike the right balance of being able to ensure a good return by way of dividend to our shareholders, being able to fund our depreciation, which is substantial, and also to be able to maintain our long-term maintenance and reinvestment program and capital. And I'm sure you've heard from my predecessors, this is a capital intensive business. And when we look to buy new pieces of gear out at the port, they are big ticket items. So already over the next 6 months, we will be having a new pilot boat arrive, $2 million. We have the cross wharf at Port Chalmers, $6 million. We have the refurbishment of the wharf at Raby, $7 million. So they're big ticket items. And then when you look further forward from that, and you're looking at things like cranes, 16 to 17 million, new dredge, 25 million. A conservative balance sheet is very, very important to us, and I believe to the shareholder. Equally, we are very mindful of our commitment to our shareholder to ensure that we can continue to pay an appropriate and fair dividend. And it's always a question of just getting that balance right between the short term and the long term. We try to operate at the upper end of our dividend policy. And it's fair to say that when we can, we will pay a good dividend, but potentially even a higher dividend than we have signalled, but that will depend on the circumstances at the time. But in the meantime, we're confident that we are paying fair dividend. The property portfolio is important in that, both currently and looking into the future, and it enables to balance our long-term capital requirements.
So just for the sake of discussion, the dividend that is received by the port as a percentage of the asset, as a percentage of our investment is I mean, it's helpful, but it's actually not a significant return on that investment. You guys must be aware of that. How can we see the dividend increase beyond what you are seeing at the moment?
Well, yes, we are aware of that. And I think in our results announcement, we refer to the fact we are constantly looking as to how we can drive operational performance and capital utilisation. And we had a board meeting this week, and that was a key item for discussion. And we'll be working with Kevin and the team over the next few months to take a long, hard look at how we can make sure that we are as efficient as we can be. There are always going to be trade-offs, as you'll appreciate, but as efficient as we can be, thoroughly benchmarking ourselves against other ports and comparable organisations, and ensuring that we have something in our back pocket so that we can continue to fund the future. I mean, it's important to remember that if we increase dividends, on our current performance, we would have to borrow to increase dividends. Our costs would go up because interest rate bill would go up. And yet we still face these significant capital investments, which we know about, and those which we don't know about. We don't want to get into a situation of either reducing dividend or not paying dividend, or even worse, coming to the shareholder for capital to enable us to fund our ongoing maintenance and investment. So it's a balance, as I'm sure you're appreciating.
Yes, Andrew, go for it.
Just going back to your point, it's an infrastructure company, and high cost with structure replacement and plants, etc. You talk about benchmarking the other ports. If we were to look at the other ports' equity ratio, would they be comparable? Don't need to answer the question now if you haven't got the info, but it'll be interested. I'm sure others would be, how we compare the other ports throughout New Zealand.
I don't carry that detail in my head, but you
I
can.
can email you the Deloitte.
That's even
I think you've got it, which is the Deloitte report that comes out every year, benchmarks every report. I can flick it through. I've got a PDF.
Thank you.
So if you haven't got it, I'll send that through to you. I'll send that through and you distribute that around. It's a good read.
Yeah, Pat, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, one of the differences between Port Otago and the other ports is that we've got a very heavy property portfolio, and so it's not quite apples to apples. You know, when you look at those benchmarks, that benchmark data is very good, but just bear in mind the mix of our assets relative to the other ports. There's really no other ports in New Zealand that have got the same level of investment property, you know, as we have, and as Tim referred to, it's that investment property that gives us the sustainable earnings that in turn gives us the comfort and confidence of a dividend going forward. So that is, we are a bit different from our ports.
And I think another point of difference too is we actually have two ports and two channels, which I think is unique in New Zealand, which again just makes the comparisons different. Having said that, when we talk about how we're different, that's not intended to come across as an excuse or as a reason not to be having a hard look at ourselves. It's just we need to recognise we're not always comparing apples with apples.
So, just another question in regards to equity ratio. So you talk about a conservative equity ratio. At the moment, it's 80%. What would be the range of conservative equity ratios?
Yeah, so we operate under a 75 to 85% ratio.
Councillor Laws, we have a question. Michael?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Tim.
Hi, Michael.
Despite COVID over the last 4 years, the equity value of Port Otago increased by 27%, which is remarkable, really. And when you say that you've got a ratio of 75 to 80%, an operating equity ratio of 75 to 85%, which is it? Because that's quite a disparity between 75 and 85%.
Thanks, Michael. Look, they're not absolute. They are a range within which we operate because year on year circumstances will change. And some years, I mean, our equity ratio has come back a little bit this year because we've taken on a little bit more debt to fund some capital development on the investment portfolio. Next year, depending on how that activity is going, what our internal cash flows are looking like, it could go up again. But it's a traffic light arrangement for us in terms of when do we start to get concerned about just our ability to maintain liquidity, current and long.
Yeah, perhaps I can just add to that. That 70 to 85% is the target in the statement of corporate intent, which is signed off with the regional council each year. I think, like looking forward, like over the next 10 years, in terms of some of our plans at the moment, that equity ratio may drop into sort of the mid-70s, but then it will come back again at the end of that 10-year period, just as we look at things at the moment. So it does move around over a period of years, and as Tim said, we're about 80% at the moment, but it is that range that's been set between us and the regional council pursuant to the statement of corporate intent that Tim's referring to.
And the second question I've got is, of that increase in equity value of 27% over the last 4 years, how much of it is attributed to Chalmers property?
Most of it.
Significant amount.
Yeah, I haven't got the exact number, Michael, but it would be most of it. But of course, property revaluations can change. We've been enjoying a period of them going up, but equally they can, when the market conditions change, they can go down. And one of the things that we focus very much on is our underlying earnings, to try and take those variations around property out of the equation, given that they can fluctuate.
Which is leading to my next question. I'm sure you've already anticipated it. Exactly that. As declining property values seem to be, particularly in the residential housing market, are they also being reflected in the commercial property market as well? And if so, what will your balance sheet look like in 12 months' time, given that you know what property values are out there at the moment?
Well, look, Michael, we've got a slide coming on that. If you're comfortable just parking that,
sure.
Question, we can
okay.
when the slide comes up.
Okay.
Go for it.
Cruise. That's the first cruise ship that went into Milford Sound as well. That's the one we welcomed. So I think we've covered the cruise, but you can see there that 0 last year, positive restart. So that has had an impact in the first half. When you look at our bulk business, as Tim said, it's been positive in bulk, bit of timing in logs, but it's nice to see that volume coming back up. Fuel's been pretty solid. And the good thing about fuel is the frequency has changed as we've moved away from Marsden Point. So it's been quite beneficial for Port Otago that international shipping lines have been coming directly to us, and we've had a slight increase in frequency of vessels and effectively a slight increase in volume, which is positive. Ravensdown's had a good year here, mainly because the North Island plant had a fire in it and they had to divert production to our plant here, which drove a bit of additional volume in the first half. So it was nice to be able to see that volume come through us. And the other is just Fashions, LPG and cement or an amalgam. It's relatively small, but relatively flat year on year. So a good bulk result. Container business, the key is the top one. We always look at exports, which is our hinterland and our region. And we were bang on. So 34,000 TU out, same as last year. The imports is, we're only a small import port because effectively we're bringing in lactose and component parts for the dairy industry and a few other things, not TVs and sofas and everything else. They come into Auckland and Tauranga and Littleton. So that 30% down on full imports, while it looks big, it's just a timing issue of when our customers are importing lactose mainly. So that'll come right. And then the balancing number is empties because that's relatively flat. And the positive is transships there that we saw transships drop off as shipping lines started to call direct on ports, and now they're starting to transship a bit more through Port Otago again, which is encouraging. That's when they bring it in on a feeder and put it into effectively the Southern Star, and it goes up to TPP and on to China. So that's positive for us, and we'd expect to see a little bit more of that build through. So overall, pretty good result for containers. We start to see the property come through here, and right-hand side just shows our diversified portfolio of Auckland, Hamilton and Dunedin. So continued investment in Hamilton, that number's increasing year on year. Auckland 231 million, Dunedin about the same, 260. And as Tim alluded to, we've seen increasing property rentals. That's as we've completed projects and they've come online, as well as rental increases with our existing ground lease portfolio and our own investment properties coming through there. So a very good property result. And the development margin is 0 and 0. That just means we haven't completed any of our property developments in that period. We've got a number on the go, and I'll talk to those a little bit later about when timing of completion and what they'll impact.
So Michael, I think you were asking us to have a view on commercial property valuations, given what's happening in the residential market. Is that a fair summary of what you're looking for? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a property clock we continue to stare at in our business, and there's various versions of it from anyone from Colliers to JLL and others. But we particularly don't focus too much on the right-hand side because that's not our sweet spot. So effectively, we're always looking at the left-hand side, which is industrial. Good thing is we're starting to see rising rents come through across the board. And if you think of the construction costs for a new build, the increases for the last couple of years, that's had to flow under additional rent. So new builds have been coming on the market at higher rents just because you've got to make the numbers work. And you've had increasing rates, you've had increase in insurance and increasing funding rates, all driven up rents in the commercial sector. Mainly on new builds to start with, but then you think of a rent renewal of an older building that may be up for a rent review. That's all going to get adjusted to market. So the new builds drag up the existing rentals to market. It takes a little bit of time to average up, but effectively that's what's been happening. So we're in a function at the moment of rising rents. So yeah, rent roll will go up as a result of market forces. On the other side, interest rates are higher, so that squeezes your margin, and you've got to absorb that. But effectively, with a higher rent, when it comes to valuing your property at the end of the year, your discount rate, which is the cap rate we all talk about, they've been around about 5% and been quite low. They're likely to ease out and get a bit higher. So if you think of that equation, you got a higher rent, but your discount rate, your cap rate's actually going out as well. It sort of equals out a wee bit. So we've got a natural buffer with higher rents versus the cap rate unwinding. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be neutral. It's just two opposing forces that you end up with an outcome. If rents were falling and cap rates were rising, you'd have a significant problem. But rents are rising to mitigate the cap rate. So we're in a position where we value all our properties at 30 June independently, and the board goes through a process land on a value. That'll happen in due course. But the signals we're seeing at the moment are, with rents rising, cap rates will go out a little bit, but it's not going to be as material as it could have been if rents were falling. So we'll go through that process, and the outcome will be the outcome because it's a valuation process. But you always got to remember, as we alluded to, we focus on underlying profit, which is cash flow and real money. This is a book adjustment we do every year. You know, that's what it is. It just changes the value of our assets. There's no cash involved. So we've had these nice write-ups for a number of years, and there could be possibly a neutral or a write-down, and that'll be the answer at the end of the year.
Just in regards to your discount rate, has that been stable over the years, or is it fluctuating every year?
Been compressed over the last few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, clearly it's as money was cheap, the cap rate got compressed. So at heights, you know, peak, a brand new building with a long-term tenant, the cap rate might have had a 3.9 in front of it at its peak, just under 4, which you could borrow money at 2.3.
And that'd be like 12 months
12,
ago.
18 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's just progressively been slightly getting a bit harder. And the cap rates, you know, we've always been conservative, so we haven't been aggressive in respect of our pricing. So effectively,
So you don't expect any surprises in terms of if you've had a conservative discount rate all the way through, you're not going to see any sharp increases or decreases one way or the other. That's
Can never effectively go to be surprised. But I think also we need to focus on the discounts rate. They vary depending on what type of property class you're in. And the bulk of our property is an industrial, and the discounts aren't showing the signs of pressure, which are beginning to come through in office and retail for the reasons that we're all familiar
in
with.
terms of Michael's question about sort of 12 months out, then we're not really seeing any kind of significant decrease in the value of property, investment property.
we're not seeing those signals yet. But you know, we've just got to see how the year pans out, and ultimately the valuation will be the valuation at 30 June. But with a rise in rent, that's going to mitigate any impact of a cap rate going up. Nice offset, but whether it's neutral or negative, we'll understand that at 30 June.
And again, our cautious answer isn't covering any. You shouldn't be worried about our cautious answer. We're just cautious.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a corollary to that?
Yeah, go for it, Michael.
I just might have missed something, but in the previous slide, you showed us on the balance sheet, you had an asset value overall of $703 million, yeah? And a debt of 127. I've got that right? Equity v debt. And then on the last slide I just saw, you had the property valued at $606.3 million for the 30th of June last year, right?
Right.
So have I missed something there, that you're valuing the port at less than $100 million? The non-property equity of Port of Otago?
So the 703 million is just our equity. So that's the net between our total assets less our liabilities.
Yeah.
As well as the investment property, there are our port operating assets, which are in excess of $250 million.
$250 million. Okay. So,
Total assets are 800.
so this is Chalmers Properties now is getting up to, gee, what would that be? Almost 75% of your balance sheet, 75% of your equity. Is that right?
Yeah, the math is about there.
Yep.
So you're really a property company rather than a property company at the moment, aren't you?
Well, I've heard that description applied to us, Michael. Yes.
No, it seemed to be true on the basis of these figures. All right, that's cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, if we look forward to 23 key projects, Tim's touched on a couple. We've got the Ravensdown Wharf upgrade. That wharf was damaged and closed. You can see there it's looking pretty new and shiny. That project's gone pretty well, and our head partner is nearly complete. It'll be completed next month. No issues with the construction. It's been nice and quiet. So it's quietly got on and been constructed, and we'll have ships back on it. And that's a good thing because it means we can park the ships directly at the plant, and all those truck movements drop out of the city. from Dunedin Bulk Port back to the Ravensdown plant. So reduce our carbon footprint and takes a bit of traffic off the road. So it'll be a nice resolution to that last 12 months. So happy to get that one done. And also mentioned our cross wharf. This is the last component of our Port Chalmers Wharf upgrade process. It's been going on for a number of years. So you can see there it's a very old 1890 wood structure that's been effectively parked up and we don't use it, and it's been cordoned off. So that'll be replaced by modern, effectively, it's near enough to a bridge along there to effectively maintain the end of the basin and provide us a slightly bigger turning circle for our straddles around onto the beach street, just giving us a safety improvement for our team with that little triangle that gives us a bit more room. Okay, so that's starting. Our Hebs team will come off the Ravensdown project, have a bit of a holiday, and then their gear will come down to port and you'll start constructing that new wharf between cruise seasons effectively. So as soon as cruise finishes, they'll be into it and then they'll be done by the time the next cruise ship comes next season. So a good bit of infrastructure that's well overdue and completes our wharf infrastructure at Port Chalmers, which is great. Talk about our design, build and lease projects in Hamilton. There's various states of them, and the one on the bottom left is pretty close to being finished, New Zealand Windows. So it should be finished end of the month, possibly a few weeks into next month. So getting close there. Altus is May, and Spectrum down the bottom right is June. And pleasingly, we've signed up Steel and Tube. This is the third building we've built for them. So second in Hamilton, and we've got the Steel and Tube building here. So it's nice to have a customer coming back time after time. Just shows you they've got confidence in what we build. So pleasing to have them signed up. So those projects get rolled out, and as you can see, all things going well, there'll be 1, 2, 3 that get completed before balance date, which means there'll be a development margin that will go into that slide as our part of our underlying earnings, and then that rent roll generated by those 3 will pop into our ongoing earnings into the following financial year. And at the moment, we're carrying the costs as we build. And then Steel and Tube will drop into the second half, our first half of next year. We'll be reporting back to you on that. So good progress up north. The exciting one in Port Chalmers, which is very cool, is our new office and museum extension. Quarters are going well there. It's on time and tracking well. So at this stage, we'll be in July. So that's shaping up nicely. The museum team's underway and redesigning the museum for a launch in November and a grand opening, which will be pretty exciting for our community and for us. So yeah, pretty happy with how that's going at this stage. Okay. And that, just take those mock-ups, that's along the lines of the design. Good morning. Our latest design, build and lease signed is Runaka. Pleased to have that signed up and ready to go. So we'll be moving from design into implementation and kicking off tomorrow in earnest at our end. So pleased to be able to get on and do that for you. We continue to engage with the IC, DCC and iwi on the harbour plan, starting to formalise that, and we are having good engagement at this stage. We've got a draft plan, and then it's just a matter of formalising that into a steering group to be able to effectively get some governance around that and develop that plan, and look forward to getting into some of these projects. The one that's probably starting to build is the top of the list is effectively our back beach area, cycleway coming on stream. I think through the induction process, we explained that the cycleway coming on stream mid-year, we're going to have some demand for ferries and commercial activity at back beach. So that's a project we need to fast track to be able to get some support and collective support to enable that to get some development there. So that's something we'll be looking at this year. The last one is pretty topical for me. We've all seen the cyclone. It's been pretty tragic to see what's gone up north. But the tail end of it reached all the way down to us. So we lost the beacon at the end of the mole and lost a few metres of the mole. And sobering reminder, if it had been the other way around, the epicenter would have been down here, it would have been a different story. So climate change adaptation is a focus for us. This year is going to be working our way through the plan. I'm sure there's going to be lots of learnings coming out of the cyclone in due course. At the moment, we've offered support to the ports, and clearly they've got a few issues. But down the track, we'll find out some of the learnings, and we'll be factoring that into our plans for the future. So the mole is one of those things that we'll be having a good steer at. Okay.
You've got a question?
Well, I was glad to see that someone's given Tim the presentation we got yesterday from Paul Monroe about Erringwana. I thought I saw, no, I thought I saw those papers. Must be
Different presentation, perhaps.
Okay, sorry, that's different. So we had a presentation yesterday from Paul Monroe from the Erringwana League, and he's really concerned about the salt marshes and their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into that matter now and the reasons, his suggested reasons for it. But it's I just wondering, they are issues that go across the mole and the that area, and climate change adaptation preserve the salt marshes. Are you aware of?
Yeah,
Well, no,
absolutely.
we-
And look, coincidentally, Kevin and I spent time on the water yesterday,
Uh-huh.
lurking around the mole and that whole area. So it is top of lurking's probably the
Yeah,
right
that's
word.
it. We weren't lurking.
Inspecting.
Consider
Sorry
it.
about that. Look, we are aware of the issue. We're obviously very focused on harbour protection because that mole is so important
Yeah.
to the region. But obviously the other issues over there, they're on the agenda. So, but haven't seen this presentation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And clearly, we've been working with DOC because it's a DOC facility, and we've offered support, and we've offered to pump sand. We're not consented to, and we'd love to help them out, and we've offered that. But ultimately, DOC have to give us the green light and work their way through that. So we're in their hands.
Thank you.
Elliot, I think you have your hand up. Your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I was just going back to your talk of Back Beach and the need for a ferry there. Is that in addition to the port-to-port one currently that you're envisioning?
Yeah, well, I think market forces will determine that. So I don't have an idea, but all I know is our cruise lines are excited about a new experience for their cruise passengers at Dunedin, and that will be unique in New Zealand. To come off a ship, get on an electric bike, and be able to go either sides of the harbour and into town. And that's just our cruise passengers. Think of the locals. Our staff talking about electric bikes. Punters from Dunedin will be going down to Port Chalmers to look at our new museum. We just need some facilities, some infrastructure there to support that. And I think that gives us the work together to deliver some of those.
Yeah, because I've been eyeing up something similar. I think there is that demand, or at least there definitely will be. Is there conversations happening currently with Orbus and stuff about the potential of incorporating it into the public transport network or anything? If are those conversations happening yet, or is that something further in the future?
I think the Harbour Plan Forum provides those the opportunity for those discussions to happen in due course. But effectively, we need the ORC, DCC, ourselves, and iwi to hold hands to be able to enable a project like that to get delivered. So I think we're planning to use that Harbour Forum to be able to get on with that. But happy to help.
Cool.
Councillor Moon.
Yeah, I just wondered with regards to, Tiger and Southland being grappling with the drought over us. But any sort of feedback suppliers, processes, the impact of containers next 6 months. Just looking forward over the next 6 months, have you had any feedback about tapering off of container work?
No, I think if we'd had the drought and there was a real push on last year, we'd all struggle. But just with effectively a little bit in New Zealand, container supply is always tight down our end of the world, but we're okay at the moment. And the shipping lines are well used to dealing with our, frozen cargo coming out of our hinterland. And the reefers are just so important. So key component for us is reefers, and that's why we have 1,000 plugs at the port available. So there's enough buffer there to work with our customers even right.
Another query just for the need of quite a bit of focus on health and safety perspective, security.
Dunedin Bulk Port, yeah.
Control of.
Yes,
How's that progressing?
it is progressing. Board signed off on the gating project late last year, and we're underway. So we're working with some of the parties involved. And first stage of the gating will start from down where our cruise berth is, along through to where Harbour Cold is. So that's probably likely to be underway in the next 2 months. This stage one. And then progressively we'll work our way through.
Very good. Thank you.
So I think our final slide, Chair, is our views on the outlook, and we've essentially covered these in the presentation. So obviously the cruise numbers will be well above the 100. Steady return to container and bulk volumes. We've talked about property investment. We've talked about our investment in people and systems. And just re-emphasize the comment that Kevin made. We have been thinking seriously about climate resilience. But it's fair to say last week's events, like most other people in New Zealand, it's certainly lifted it up our priority list. So we'll be doing a lot of work in this area and coming back to you in due course. So, nothing from you.
Nothing further, no. Well, thank you for your presentation. Is there any further questions from councillors?
Probably sort of a questionary comment, really. So current, like last year, your income was 88, and then you've pumped out a $13 million dividend to us, and this year it could be, if we double the 6 months, you're going to be around 100. So you're giving us 15 million this year by way of dividend that we've sort of bargained on. So you actually get of your income, you're giving us, while we've got this huge property portfolio, which is non-cash, you're actually giving us 15% of your income. So is that sitting you quite comfortable at that level?
Well, I think you're including the property revaluation as our income. We look at underlying
that's right.
cash earnings. So that's where we apply the dividend policy. So projected full year dividend and our projected full year income, what percentage? Where do you think we will be as a ratio?
So the forecasted dividend is $14 million for this financial year. Our contribution from operating activities is year to date for the 6 months, 14 million compared to like last year, the full year was 22. So we should be favourable to that last year result, and it's a benefit of
so which just absolutely shows the critical nature of when you've had the ebb with your cruise ships and other volumes sort of under pressure with what was happening around the world, the absolute critical nature of the property part to funnel money into Otago from the North Island.
And that's absolutely, Councillor. And I think as Pat touched on it earlier as well, that rental income is really important. And yes, we have a very large property portfolio, but we are a port company. And that property portfolio enables us to keep the bridge between the region and the world open. And we can't afford to lose sight of that.
Thank you.
Got a couple of questions. Richard first, and then Elliot, you can go second.
Just a question, and what we wanted you to say, a questionary comment. I like that. It's opened the room for the email. I was interested in the cruise ships then, and just for some of us who might not have been watching this for a long time, what is the highest number of cruise ships in a season we've ever had, just so we can compare that to this season, and also are there trends in that area towards size of ship and things like that we might be interested in?
I can answer that
Yeah,
one.
but no, you can.
So the year of COVID, we'd quietly built up from 70, probably 5 years before that. We had 126 booked the year of COVID, but I can't remember what date it got locked down, but February-ish. So we missed about 10. So we had 116, I think was the number that year. That was our record number. This year we might do 103, just depends on. And you know, we had a briefing from the master of the Viking Orion yesterday. The sort of worldwide trends at the moment are the expedition ships are very popular. So they're the smaller ships. There's a lot of those being built. They'll take a little bit to flow through down to here, but we've had the National Geographic vessel here, which is pretty cool if you get to see that. So we're expecting to see more up to the need, you know, those smaller ships, because the bigger ships can't get between the islands. But those expedition ships, you know, under 180 meters long can get through. So I think we're looking at 20 next year. And over time, we hope to see that quietly just increase as the fleet changes. It takes a while for these fleets to change, because you buy a ship, you're going to have it for 35 years.
Yeah.
So they do just sort of take a while to average out.
Yeah.
And there's still the big Oasis class vessels being built, but they're too big to get to us, so we can't get them in. So the Ovation of the Sea is about as big as we can take. So there's probably the same number of big ships we've got. The middle's about static now. It's going to be that smaller end that we're going to see growth.
Yeah. And my questionary comment was around, thank you very much again for the very strong performance over the 6-month period, which doesn't just happen, but yeah, you mentioned a conservative business model, but what that can mean for our region and what you talked about in the diversification, enabling us to run as a well-oiled machine, I guess, as a port, which is well maintained and invests in its future, and doesn't debt fund where it doesn't need to make it even more efficient for our people. Yeah, as in a partnership of a regional council and a port, we do a lot for the region in terms of running a really good port too. So it's worth always remembering that role as well, I think. So yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for bearing with me without a question.
We just had Elliot first, and then entry. Elliot.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and totally understand if you don't have the numbers on you or they're not available at this time, but I was just wondering if you had any estimates of the number of phosphate imports expected over the next year.
We unfortunately the Ravensdown site was in the North Island was impacted by the cyclone, so there were some issues there. So I'd expect the first half volumes to carry on probably into the second half.
Andrew.
What does that sort of look like in numbers? Sorry.
Where you go, Elliot?
I was just wondering what that looks like in sort of numbers.
Well, I think we did 97,000 tonnes first half, so we might be somewhere around the second half.
Cool. Thanks.
Andrew, and then we've got Michael as well.
Sorry, this is my last question, but electrification of the new ships that are being built, is that starting to happen? Where's it internationally? Where are we at?
Yeah, well, a little story from yesterday. We were on the Viking Orion. That's quite a high-end cruise ship. That ship's got the capacity to plug it. They've been trying for 6 months to find a port around the world where they have to configure that plug, simple terms, to be able to then connect. And they haven't been able to do that yet. They can't get into a port to do that. They're in their fleet. I think they've got 10 of the Viking vessels similar to this. Only one can plug in at the moment reliably at the ports, and they're in Norway and Alaska. So it's embryonic, but it's coming. And we're seeing that in cruise. A lot of the cruise ships have got the capacity. It's just actually getting the connections. Container ships still a wee way away, I think. So it's on our watch list, and we'll continue to look at the technology and be prepared. But it's not something we're going to do next year.
It's fair to say that it's sort of more short, medium term rather than long term in terms of the trend to eventually have plugins in at most ports where
I think it'll be medium term to me. You know, the infrastructure required is significant. And it's an Aurora issue down to us, not so much a port issue. So it's long-term infrastructure, and then who's going to pay and where's the demand? And at the moment, the demand's not there. It'll build. So you still see the point-to-point ferries at a smaller scale, the Fuller's type scale, that's doable. But the bigger ships, it's 8 megawatts of power, which is all of Port Chalmers. It's an perspective.
Most companies have the same challenge in terms of setting up infrastructure as well. Yeah.
And we heard about the shipping lines, the cruise ships are looking to build their new vessels with hydrogen capability, like Emware. So and it's not quite there yet, but that's the way they're thinking. And I think that'll be the same for us in heavy transport. When it comes and how we use it, to be determined. But it feels more hydrogen than electrification for the big heavy lifting stuff.
I hear that like the Richardson Group in Southland are progressing.
Yeah, they're injecting hydrogen into their diesel. I think so. We'll see more of that and we'll learn. And when the time's right, we'll be in.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you've got your hand up.
I just want to explore the debt to equity ratio. I mean, you talk about conservative, you really are conservative, aren't you? You've got it's roughly 1 to 6.5, is that right? Your debt to equity ratio.
Yeah, that's about right.
80%.
It's a percentage.
Down.
So yeah,
And so, and then the next question I'd ask is, of the total debt you've got, how is it apportioned? And maybe I missed that slide. I'm sorry, my internet's been in and out this morning. How is the debt proportioned across property and the port of the total debt you've got in terms of percentage?
Yeah, Stephen, can you comment
So,
on-
so we do look at the individual balance sheets of each of the entities within the group. The port is probably more conservatively geared than the property. There'd be more debt attached to the property portfolio. That's where the development.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's not the question I asked. I said, what's your percentage across property? So of your total debt, how much have you got accrued against property and how much have you got accrued against the port?
Yeah, I haven't got the breakdown with me at the moment.
Well, roughly. Yeah, I mean, you'd know roughly, surely.
There's probably, say, of the total debt of 127 million, there's probably 60 to 70% against the property portfolio.
Okay. And then the next question I'd have of you is, are you an expansionary company? So is your aim to grow your balance sheet?
It's the aim to grow the balance sheet. Well,
Is the aim to grow the property? Sorry, not the property, the aim to grow the business. Is your aim to grow the equity in your business to make more profit?
Well, businesses need to grow to ensure that they continue to make appropriate profit to enable adequate return on capital invested.
Right, that's what I had assumed. So therefore, why aren't you using your debt, or why aren't you using debt to grow your business better?
Two comments about debt, Michael. I thought we covered it off before. Debt can increase returns, but increased returns increases your risk profile. And
Yeah,
also,
but this is very conservative, Tim. You have to.
But equally, Michael, if we were to change our gearing ratio, of course, that would flow through to the gearing ratio of the regional council. So that's something that the regional council would need to be comfortable with. So I made the comment before that yes, we are conservative. It's a question of degree as to whether or not some think we're too conservative, others might have a more aggressive assessment. We look at the gearing of the company. We take into account our duties and responsibilities as directors under the Companies Act and under the Port Companies Act, and we make what we consider to be the appropriate judgment call, given the nature of our business, the nature of our assets, and the fact that it's a long-term infrastructure business.
Yeah, I think the other couple of points are that we are publicly owned, so we do have a responsibility to be conservative. And I think the bigger point for me is that unlike any other company, we've certainly never had an intention, never will, to come to the regional council for more capital. We got to, like most companies, if they get into trouble with too much debt, can go to the shareholder and seek some extra capital. We're not in a position to do that. Well, you're not in a position to respond to that request. We know that. So that's another reason we've got to be fairly conservative so that we're never, ever put in a position where we've got to come to you and say we need more capital. So it's just.
No, but- well, I mean, that's the aim of every council-controlled organisation, not to come to their shareholder. But you know, you've always got that backstop. No, but I'm trying to work out here is that other port companies, and you mentioned the Deloitte's report, I had a look through that last night, but other companies, port companies, are much more highly geared than Port of Otago in terms of debt ratio, but in actual fact, they're just as successful. If I look at somewhere like Tauranga, and they're also publicly owned by regional councils.
Yeah, we've got a lot of property in our portfolio, so it's not just a port. And I think we've looked at our equity relative to the property companies, and while we're more conservative, we're not too far behind in terms of the debt equity and on the property side.
I guess this is an ongoing debate. Do you have this ongoing debate? Have you just reached a fixed position and you're not prepared to reconsider or renegotiate that with the council?
Michael, can I perhaps butt in here? I think that this whole sort of situation can revolve around the statement of intent and the directions that we actually pass through to the port. It also has a bit to do with risk appetite, which I'm not quite sure we understand fully for the port. But there are some intricacies here that I think we're bringing out in this discussion and would be good for further discussion with the Port Liaison Group and the board of Port Otago. Would you be happy to park it there?
Oh, listen, I just want to make sure that it's on there to debate, that we're just not accepting that it's a conservative gear ratio. This is incredibly conservative in comparison to other public and private in New Zealand. And I do think it's worthy of having that debate and that discussion. I just want to flag that today. I wanted to draw out these figures to tell you, to the rest of the council, my governance team, how conservative that debt structure is. And that's what we've established today.
The point's made. Thanks, Michael.
And without prolonging the discussion, be assured that we constantly question ourselves in terms of, are we appropriately using the balance sheet that we have? But we look forward to the next iteration of that chat.
Thanks for your response. We've just got Alexa, you had a question. Do you still have that question?
I actually think I'll leave it because I'm pretty sure it will have been covered earlier, and I'll catch up with Kate and Harriet to do so. So I'll just leave that, and if not, I'll find out from these guys at a later date.
I think we've probably come to the end. Thank you very much, guys, for coming. And, it was a bit difficult having to present to the owner, but really appreciate that. So we're moving on into our own quarterly financial reporting now. So we go from yours to ours. It's almost the same. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much.
We have 5 minutes break.
Morning. Sorry?
When did you print these? Or did you print those?
We're back in.
Really? I just had to choose one person. Okay. All right, so yeah, let's welcome the finance staff, Nick and the team. We've got the quarterly financial report through to the 31st of December 2022. You got everyone back in from the live stream? Okay. So welcome, take it, Sarah and Jasmine and Nick. You're quite used to you, Nick. So yeah. So look, I'd just like to hand over to you to take us through this. I think we will look first at the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure. If you want to take us through that one first, which was 713, and then also the statement of financial position 714, and then we can look at the activity reports after that. That'd be fine. So I'll hand over.
Oh, sorry, I'm just flipping my pages over. So I can reorder that for next quarter. So this is a quarterly report that we bring you every 3 months. So I will reorder that and put the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses and balance sheet first, and then put maybe the financial summary of the activities and then Jasmine's performance measures, if that would be the order you would prefer. That is
My thinking around that was that we get the high level view of performance of the organisation first before we get into the complexity of the activity reports. Sure. It can be quite confusing. So yeah, let's start with the high level stuff.
Sure. So we've got the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses, and I explain in the notes any of the movements, which is quite large compared to our budget, which is the annual plan. I'm happy to take any questions on any of those notes that are on the statement of comprehensive revenue expenses, if anyone has any.
Can you summarise that result for us verbally?
So the result is difficult. It's not difficult to say. Like, we have obviously the comprehensive revenue and expenses, but not always that's the P&L, I suppose, for the whole of council. So that doesn't mean that that's where those funding buckets come from. So you'll see in your activities reports where the more detail is that sometimes we actually will have an activity which is funded from general rates that perhaps has gone over budget, which means that we haven't got enough funding from general rates to pay for that, and that would impact our general rate reserve, where we have other activities in here which would be funded through targeted rates or grants, and so it just affects that funding side as well. So you can't it's difficult to look at the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses as a whole as a performance for council, but we do have total revenue. So our rates revenue is struck once a year. We send out rates bills on the 1st of September, and that is due the 31st of October. And following this, there is a rates paper which discusses that. We have subsidies and grant revenue. That's a little bit up compared to budget. The vast majority of grant revenue that's sitting in there is from NZTA, Waka Kotahi. There is also some grant revenue in there from MBI, which is in relation to some of our biosecurity work around wallabies and wilding conifers. It is difficult in the fact that we've had movements in relation to that grant funding from what we budgeted in our annual report. So that's things like the extension by central government of the 50% fare subsidy. So that means that those fares are coming through as grant revenue, where we budgeted them to come through as other income fare revenue from the person taking the bus. So you'll see some discussion in my points around that. And then other income is below budget. We've had, there's bullet points there of consent processing, the transport revenue, as I said, how the 50% fares. It's really kind of not really that far out other income. It's difficult for us to budget, and you'd really need to look at the forecast and the fact that some of those projects are just behind. It's not that we won't receive them, it's just we budgeted to receive them at Q2, and that hasn't eventuated. There's been a delay. And then we go into the expenditure section. Really the main movement in expenditure is employee benefits expense. There's been a reduction in the employee benefits expense, which is just, we've got less staff than what we budgeted for in the annual plan. It's obviously we're the same as every other company and entity in New Zealand, it's really difficult to get staff at the moment. So you'll see in bullet point 3, I've got a table which shows you the prior year FTE numbers, the budgeted FTE numbers we had, and then what we had at quarter 1 and quarter 2. We are growing, so we've improved our employee numbers compared to quarter 1, but it is it's not where our FTE budgeted figure was, which is why it's lower than budget. And then that really gives us our operating surplus and deficit. And then we have, I suppose, below the line. So we have other gains and losses, which is made up of gains and losses that we've made on our managed fund, as well as at year end that we have gains and losses that we've made on our investment property. We have revaluation gain and loss shares on the subsidiary, which at the moment is nil, but you will see last year was 87 million. That is just the revaluation of Port. So that's done by a third party entity every year on balance date.
Okay, so our deficit situation for the first 6 months is $640,000
Yes.
as a result, and it's just revenue less expenditure equals deficit of 640.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions around this document, Andrew?
Under the notes, number 2, third last bullet point refers to Contact Energy, the agreement and still being negotiated. It may not be a question for you, Sarah, or yeah, I don't know, but obviously, is that an annual process that we've got to negotiate a deal with them in terms of their contribution to the flood scheme?
So the agreement there, it's not, they're not done, that's not a rate funded activity. So we have to invoice them for it. So as with anything that you're going to invoice anybody for, they you have to agree what you're going to charge them. Yeah. So we have an ongoing issue of having to negotiate with them, and we come up with the costs, and it's not as simple as saying, well, here's what it costs and here's your invoice. They push back and say, well, they don't think that's what it should cost and what they should pay.
So we haven't got like a heads of agreement that indicates some sort of percentage increase on an annual basis or anything like that?
Well, the heads of agreement says that, well, if you go back, there was a contract, and this goes back probably 15 years. Basically what it says is that, yeah, they will pay the agreed costs, but you've got to get to the point of agreeing the costs before you can invoice them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do know that that's something that Michelle Mifflin, the engineering manager, and Gavin are working on with them. It's not like it's not being progressed. They are actively working on it with Contact Energy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has actually been going on, well, it's obviously been going on for quite a while, but it's come up every, this comes up regularly, and I just wonder why we're actually doing any work before we've got it signed. Why do we actually do the work if we haven't got sign off from them that they're happy to pay the account? I just wouldn't be doing the work.
Yeah, part of it is we've got an operating maintenance agreement in place, and I can't remember which company it's with. So we've already got that in place. Contact's view is that the maintenance being done, does that all need to be done? Our view is yes, it does. So you get into a disagreement about the level of work that needs to be done. If if the view was that we don't do it, we could do that, but then you run the risk that the scheme's not being maintained. And then the risk is if an event happened and we haven't been maintaining the scheme, where does that sit with? Whose liability does that sit with? So we're taking, if you like, what we think is the prudent view of we've got to make sure that the scheme is operational and fit for purpose. And that means that we've still got to maintain it. And then we're arguing after the fact about them and what they should pick up in cost.
Yeah, so the Lower Waitaki scheme has an agreement with Meridian Energy that pays a percentage of the work program each year.
Yeah.
So that's pretty damn simple. We spend 900,000 there, they pay their percentage.
Yep.
So and it's an agreed work program. So I can't for the life of me why would be not getting into, and if Contact doesn't want that sort of agreement, well, we should be hanging them out to dry somewhere. because we can't have, yeah, that's not a very good way to do business at all, really. I mean, and if that's historically the way it's been done, well, we need to change it. It's just something, in my opinion, it's just absolutely not good enough, really.
I'll take that in Gavin's absence and action and discuss with him and Michelle.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
Waste of energy.
Okay, I have a question from Gary Keller. Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that, did you say you have that argument with them every year, Nick? And what is the extent of how much time does that take to argue that with them on a yearly basis?
Yeah, that's been, as got pointed out, Sarah pointed out, you know, there's a whole bunch of us that are having a series of meetings with them. Yeah, we just can't get any agreement. You've got to go back to the history of this. Back when that scheme got set up, there was never an agreement signed off about who was going to pay and how it was going to work. The state's right back to 15 years ago. So they've been paying every year, but there isn't actually a formally signed agreement on how that works, which is different than the other scheme. The other scheme, of course, has three parties involved. Waitaki has us, ECAN, and Meridian. Yeah, this is just us and Contact.
So do we need to be looking to get something far more formal in place with them?
That's what we're trying to do again, is document all of this and get the agreement in place. But in the meantime, you know, we go on, and before you know it, this year's done, and then we're into the next year. So yeah, it's a difficult, just lengthy, ongoing process. We've already got a scheme. It's already built. We've already got to maintain it. Now we're trying to put an agreement in place around who's going to pay for it.
Exactly.
With a party who has, you know, when it was originally set up, has the liability and was determined they should be paying, but they argue about the quantum of what they should pay every year.
Okay, rightio. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't think there's any other questions for the moment. So just in terms of the comprehensive revenue and expense, we've got a deficit of 640,000. We had a budget, a plan of a deficit of 2.29 million. So we're performing well ahead of our plan at the moment. What is the forecast for the year end?
Sorry, I do agree with you with the audit, because I'm currently looking back to the
We do the forecast on the total activity
basis
view, so that's back on page 25. But we're also looking at that. That's our total expenditure and revenue, so it includes CapEx, whereas the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses is just operating.
Yep.
So it takes off the capital. I mean, we could you know, do the forecast on the other basis. Yep. But you know, we haven't done it for this one. But if you actually go back to page 25, when you look at it on an activity view, and as I said, this then is slightly different because it includes the capital expenditure that the statement of comprehensive revenue and expenses doesn't. But basically our forecast deficit is now coming back. It's almost in line with what our budget was. So I think the previous forecast we were saying it was going to be worse. It's actually over this last quarter, and you know, more information on what we know, it's come back more into line. But as I said, that includes capital expenditure is offsetting some, you know, things that will be happening in operating expenditure.
Okay, can we move on to the statement of financial performance? Position, sorry.
So the statement of financial position obviously shows our assets and liability. The cash is just obviously cash and cash equivalents. We would put term deposits in there if we had any. There is in the Treasury report that's a bit further through in this, there is actually a detailed graph which shows you the monthly term deposits and on-demand funds, which you can see that for an 18-month trend. Trade receivables are just our normal trade receivables. They're a little bit higher at the 31st of December. We accrue for Port Otago's dividend. So we accrue that on a monthly basis, so that revenue is streamlined over the entire year rather than recognising it when the cash is received. So that is why that receivable is higher at the 31st of December than 30 June. Well, the majority of that increase. We also have our other financial assets, which is our managed fund that's held with JB Ware. So that is just a change in its market valuations depending on what the share price is. And there's also a very small amount in some foreign currency accounts. And then we've got other current assets. The majority of the other current assets is prepayment. So again, that depends on when our licenses, insurances, etc. become due. And then they actually are reduced as the benefit of those. So they're normally for a 12-month period. We would make a prepayment for 12 months and then obviously reduce that monthly as we've used the term of that agreement. We have property, plant and equipment. There is, I've detailed out the additions, disposals and depreciation. It's very much some infrastructure work in progress, some plant and vehicles, but it's pretty much the same as budget. Yep. We have our investment property, which the valuation for that doesn't change until 30 June. So that will be revalued at 30 June as part of our year-end annual report process at its fair value. That is the same as the shares and subsidiary, which is Port Otago. That again will be revalued at the end of the year. So we'll stay at its 30 June balance that it was last year. We have a deferred tax asset, which will be the last year that is there. That is the subvention payment that's on our Otago Rescue Helicopter donation. The tax rules have changed on that. So this will be the last year that we're able to claim that. We have our related party loan with Port Otago. This is the receivable that matches our borrowings further down. So we have borrowed funds to Port Otago through the LGFA. This is just our receivable balance that is the other side of that transaction. I might talk about intangible assets, they're pretty small.
So, yeah, Kate.
Just on the Otago Rescue Helicopter, if that subvention payment is no longer available, are there efficiencies in us considering someone else making that donation and using the port more efficiently?
Well,
yeah.
I
mean, in our planning reports, it is that Otago Regional Council donates the 350. Yeah, so we would have to change that.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Can I leave that as a question to consider, not to? It's just occurred to me again that yeah.
Can you clarify a subvention payment is what you said?
So we so Port Otago effectively buys that donation off us because we're not a profit entity.
Yep.
So it then means that they can recognise those profits. So that is what that asset is for us, a third of the donation.
Yeah, we could do it because we're all part of the same entity, tax group. And so effectively they could claim the donation and then they could claim that back in tax. So then they pass that tax back to us in the subvention payment. There was a tax bill that went through and the IRD closed this out. So we can't do it anymore. So yeah, we don't get any donation refund on the 350 that we donate.
But the port if the port actually did it, they would get it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but it would have to be a straight donation. Because you got to remember it can't be any, if you're doing it for return and advertising or anything like that, it's not a donation. But they then would have to take over to get that benefit of the 100,000. They would have to take over the whole 350 because they just get the deduction for the third or whatever it is.
It could be a reduction or an increase in deferred instead of the dividend.
It would become a Port Otago.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we end up with total assets of $975 million for the period 31st of December. Our current liabilities marginal 99.
The current liabilities, apart from trade payables, which is really just our accounts payables that move up and down, and most of that balance is in the trade payables is actually rates received in advance. So we treat the rates payments that we receive on the 31st of October as being for the entire financial year. So we release 1 month's worth into revenue and reduce that liability because those rates are for ratepayers have paid us for looking after the community until 30 June. So that's what the majority of the trade payables balance is, and the borrowings is our loan with the LGFA that's been taken out.
So in terms of just putting this into the discussion that we have with Port Otago around equity ratios, we're looking at an equity ratio of what at the moment? 10%. No, it's more than that. It's over 9%. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we've got, you take 827 divided by, 9.7, so it's sort of, 85,
So we're in a very strong financial position in terms of their balance sheet. So in terms of the comprehensive income statement and our balance sheet, we got a really good picture of how we are as an organisation. We have a very strong balance sheet, and we are operating to plan in terms of the comprehensive income statement. It's at this point now that I'd like to go into the complexities of our activity reporting. If you could take us through that would be good.
So if I go back, and I'm assuming you're meaning the financial ones, you don't want to talk about performance. Sorry, if I just flip back. So, and I'm happy to change this if you would like these amended. This is just what has been asked for in the past. So if you flip to page 19, there's the activity financial report. This breaks it down with our main activities that we have as council, and you can see the revenue, expenses and surplus deficit for each of those activities. You can also in Jasmine's report see the performance on those activities and how we're going with our work program. As ultimately the expenditure that we do on these, we've gone out to the community, we've said this is our work program, this is what you'd like us to do, and then this is our revenue sources to fund that, either through rates, grants, subsidies, and then our expenses that we've incurred compared to what we budgeted to. So I'm not sure if you want me to go through every one or just take any questions on any of the activities on that page 19. So it's an overview snapshot of each of the activities.
Look, just for the sake of clarity for everyone here, let's just take us through this document. Let us know how we're going with these activities.
Okay, so if we looked at a whole, this activity report includes operating and capital. So when you look at revenue, it is, so do you want me to look? I'm not sure if you want me to do via activity or kind of regional leadership.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
The easiest way to look at it, if you look at the 3 columns, you've got revenue. So overall, it's split into the 4 groups of activities. But overall, our revenue is down. So it's down by 541,000. Yep. And our expenditure is down by $1 million. So overall, our surplus or deficit, which we budgeted for a deficit of 2.8 million, is actually almost $500,000 better than what we budgeted for the first 6 months at a deficit of 2.3. So we were always budgeting for a deficit, but we're actually done slightly better. And that's because the expenditure is down by $1 million. Offsetting that partially is revenue is also down by $500,000. And then you can look at the activities, and you can see we are we've got 4 groups of activities, and then within those there's for the first 3 there's 3 or 4 sort of key significant activities, and then transport we break down into those 5, although a couple of them like STEF and regional planning or transport are very small activities, but we split it out so that you can see in particular the 2 PT networks as activities separate.
Any questions?
I have to say, just looking at this, and it is a question. In a planning framework, when you see how little we spend on transport planning as opposed to how much we spend doing it, it seems to be incredibly small. And it does worry me that maybe that's part of our issues when we have angst with our planning. I mean, do we have any comparisons of how other regional councils effectively do some of the stuff and their cost loadings? Because I think when we come to the long-term plan, and I'm thinking forward thinking here, that seems really low in planning.
Yeah, it's transport planning is around doing the the regional land transport plan. So and the regional PT plan. So whereas there is still a whole lot of planning that's going on in the two networks, but that's where that cost goes. So if you take yesterday's discussion when we were talking in transport committee, there was a lot of talk about the business case, which business case for is all about planning, but that sits in the PT Wakatipu because it's in relation to that. So it's only really the two high level regional plans that sit in that actual transport planning activity line.
Thank you. And then and for those that aren't aware, that's shared with Southland because we have a shared model. So that would be aggregated across the two because they do a lot of that for us. Okay, it's an interesting way in it. Yeah. It's that lack of clarity at this level of us understanding our investment that I'm interested in delving deeper in as we do the long-term plan.
I think this is a good report. I think it's at a level that we need to have it. It's quite clear. I do have a question. Sorry, Chairman. So I was looking at the report and basically to me the main significant difference is under regulatory. And that's the one that's been probably whether the background, whether there's the big number behind the 1.3 million variance in the regulatory under the regional leadership. Sorry.
So the main variance in regulatory, it is the reduction in revenue from what we had originally budgeted. So you'll see the budget is 1.1 million below what we had budgeted. And on page 20, I do, split out in the regional leadership, those programs, the consent processing and compliance monitoring both sit inside the regulatory activity. So they do explain it there that it's just.
That's awesome. I had that actually.
And if you had any other questions, I'd probably have to defer to Richard. in more detail.
We do have a question from Gary.
Thank you. Just so staying on this is our financial activity report. So this covers all of our financial or all of our revenue. That's correct, isn't it? So then when we back on our balance sheet, we had I think 96 mil of property and assets, which I assume will include our office building and our assets that don't provide us a return. And then we had, I think, 16 or 17 mil of investment property that I assume is property we hold under a long-term strategy that will provide us with a return. So what is the return on the investment property and where would that sit in our revenue here?
So the difference in the balance sheet is property, plant and equipment includes property that we own. So it's got all your that's where our operational property like depots and Stafford Street and whatever sit. The investment property is the property that we're holding. The bulk of it is actually the ground leases that we've got on the university. So university and the Polytech ground leases is the bulk of that. Custom House and Monarch. So is the four properties that sit in there as investment property. So that's what's there. The return that we get off that is so obviously the rental returns goes into all of our we've got all of our investment income. So we get our interest dividends, the rental on that, along with the dividend from the port. That all goes into our investment income. And then obviously that's used to offset what we require in rates. So effectively it's netting off the rates revenue that we've got when it flows through into the activity report.
Okay, so how much is that? And do we have a long-term strategy on that, on those investments and their returns?
Well, I think we talk about the port dividend a lot. The interest income is usually shown separately. I'd have to go and dig out what our rental income is off the investment properties, but basically we don't have a documented long-term strategy on those investment properties. They were endowment land that got vested to council back when council got established, and basically our strategy has been just to hold them in and use the income to offset rates in the same way we do with our interest in dividends.
But there must be a sort of yearly review or consideration of them, and that they won't still be at the same level they were on handing over of the endowment, would they?
Do you mean from what we're charging?
Yeah, or what we return off them, and how that has an impact on, what is that, and across say $100 million of overall, activity that this organisation will do on a yearly basis. What percentage does that help by?
Oh, like I said, I'd have to go away and just pull the numbers out and send it to you. But all of those investment properties, they're all on commercial leases or the leasehold land, and they have leasehold land is actually a little bit different. The reviews on that are every 7 years, I think. But commercials, the other leases, have rent reviews every 2 years, I think, for Custom House. So our return, obviously, our returns are market returns on those because the rents are reviewed in line with the contracts that we've got.
But so it could be a relatively significant number, because if, say, it's either a 10% return or a 5% return, then that would be the difference of 1.7 mil versus, say, half of that. So I'm just curious to see around when you look at the expenditure this organisation has approved yesterday to go forward, how do we best handle that without and assist the ratepayers in it?
Yeah, but we're already got that factored into the long-term plan and the annual plan. That rental revenue we've already incorporated it into our numbers. I think from memory, off those properties, we might be getting sort of about 500,000-600,000 sort of rings a bell.
They've actually just had their rents reset, which is why I don't know the number off the top of my head. They've literally just had them over the last couple of months. So we can definitely come back to you with those though.
Right, so 500-600, so they're sitting at about 4%. So a pretty low rate of return. Okay, rightio, thank you.
But you got to remember that, we're talking about the bulk of it is ground leases. The Custom House and Monarch are very small. So most of it is the ground leases. And whether that number I'm thinking is pre the latest review, like I said, I'd have to come in and have a look. But it'll be, we're not talking millions of dollars of return on them. It's in that, maybe somewhere 500-600, might be a little bit more. But I can go away and have a look and confirm that.
Kevin.
Yeah, just probably on that, and that's probably another part of the strategic thinking that we need to be doing with that, with listing that out, seeing what it's returning and what we actually want to do with that over the next 30 years or whatever. So I think it is quite important we know that and understand that. So we could have those numbers but get that in. That's again that strategic stuff. Let's get away from this and strategically say what we need.
Certainly something that needs to go to the annual plan. The planning process, isn't it?
Or the long-term plan. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, long-term plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Okay. Carry on.
I don't know if you need me to detail out. So obviously the activity financial report is a summary based at the activity level, and then I do a breakdown table of any program which has a revenue variance of 100,000 or and then there's a expenditure table following the revenue one of any expenditure that has a difference of 100,000. So that's just detailing out the actual programs that are within those activity groups, and then you can see a description of why that's happened. So
What are the standouts at the moment?
like standouts of problem areas. The revenue side, the largest would be the consents processing and compliance, which obviously we've already discussed. And there is some differences in revenue in relation to the Tari flood protection scheme. Now that is in relation to the climate resilience program for the I'm going to call it Outram Control Channel, but it is the area around that. It's not just the channel. And that work has just been delayed from what we originally budgeted in the annual plan. It's still expected. It's just that that is done on a stage of completion basis, and we haven't completed as much of the work, so we haven't got the revenue. But equally, we haven't had the expenditure. So that's why that's been delayed. There are some variances in public transport. Probably the biggest one is in PT Other, which has been caused by the Community Connection Program, which is the community services card, the new community services card. That wasn't a budgeted program, but it is 100% funded by Waka Kotahi. So although we've got expenditure that we didn't expect, we've also got matching revenue for that. So as a whole, that nets to nothing, it nets to a nil surplus for it.
Oh, yeah, so just staying on page 20, Sarah, and again, around the land and water planning part, there's 121,000 reduction in revenue caused by the Lawa project being moved and not managed by us. So what, we had a paper on that? I just can't recall what happened there.
No, what happened was, we as a council, we hosted Lawa on behalf of the regional sector. As part of that, RSHL, that role was now moved and is now being hosted by them. But when we set the budget, we still had it assumed that we would be paying that role and receiving the revenue. So it was always cost neutral to us, other than our share, our percentage contribution. Whereas because it's now changed, it changed after we'd set the budget. So we're now seeing the variance that we haven't got the cost and we haven't got the revenue.
And then the next comment below that for the 158,000 reduction revenue, the hire program for biosecurity equipment, what was that?
I would probably have to defer that to Gavin. So, my understanding is in the annual plan, we had budgeted that we would be hiring out some of our security to be used for people for biosecurity. That program has not happened so far. I don't know if it's still planned or if there has been a change from the original annual plan. I would need to follow that up with the GM.
Okay, if you could do that would be good, because if we're taking rates to do that program, and it's not happening.
No, sorry. So that revenue is, it was meant to be for fees. So we would have charged people a rental for using our equipment. That program hasn't got up and running. So obviously we haven't had the expense of needing to maintain the equipment any further from the fact that it's been used more in rentals, and that's the revenue for the rental that hasn't been received because the program's not running.
Right. So yeah, okay, that'd be good. And then the one below it, so going back up, 351 again into regulatory there. So we're on 290,000 below budget revenue on performance monitoring and also the compliance audit. Is that stuff we're just not doing, or how does that create it?
So the 290 in performance monitoring is based on, so we fixed fee our performance monitoring, but we have a staff number set through the annual plan, and our revenue policy sets a we will recover 80% through fees in the order, and that flows through to the budget. We know that there's a gap because we can work out based on the number of consents we issue, the number of performance monitoring returns we're going to get, what our revenue will be at the start of the year.
Yep.
And there's a gap between that and what the revenue policy sets our revenue at annual plan stage. And that's one of those disparities we need to correct, because we're budgeting at the moment for something we know we're not going to achieve.
Right.
Over time, that will close up. We did do a fee adjustment last annual plan because we were well undercharging the actual cost in terms of staff receiving that information.
Yep.
They're also trying to catch up on 5,000 performance monitoring returns that weren't. We never did over the last, I'm not sure how many years, and they're working through those at the moment. And then we'll be dealing only with actuals.
Yep.
And we start looking at, well, what is the appropriate staff number to deliver with the actuals? And I think we're about right. We just need to make sure that our revenue policy reflects the fees that we set for performance monitoring. Otherwise, we will always have a gap in the budget.
Yeah. And so when we're setting our annual, well, we've set our annual plan. Should we perhaps, you're going to work out that perhaps we should be, so if we take that out for the next 6 months, we could be $500,000 out.
Yeah.
All right, so we need to budget that differently.
Correct.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
So when we get to long-term plan and we start building what I'm reviewing the revenue policy.
Yeah.
And I've had a conversation with that previously. We need to have a look at that. We can't be budgeting for something we know we're not going to
Yeah,
achieve.
absolutely. Yeah. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. There's no other questions. Was there any questions on the expenditure variance table?
I think we're good.
I might hand over to Jasmine then on her performance activities. So these are the performance measures that get reported, obviously in our annual report that we have planned to make. So I'll take it as read largely. There's been a couple of targets which have moved from green to yellow in this last quarter, and a couple from yellow to red, but on the whole, we're still we're largely on track. And I can go through it if you would like, or I can just open up questions.
I think perhaps if you just have a look at the read, some explanations around that would be good.
Okay, yeah. So we have, I'll take you to, I'm not sure what page number it is in your report. So the summary page for regional leadership, you'll see governance and engagement. We have the issue with the Lagoima request. So there were 2 requests about in August, so quite early in the year, which weren't responded to on time, and that just throws out, means we cannot meet that 100% target for the year. There hasn't been any more since that initial, those initial 2 were missed, and there's been in the last year or so a real focus on staff training to understand the Lagoima process and make sure it gets passed through to the legal team so that we don't miss those deadlines. It's just unfortunate those 2 were missed early in the year.
And again, this happens every time, but I mean, legally we have to respond on time, so that's why we've got that measure there. I understand. So have we ever done any comparison to see who else is in the naughty box for not getting 100%? You know, on other councils, and do we? As said, I would think that's a very good result, but I mean,
yes, I'm not sure. I'd have to go and find that out.
To see,
I can compare. Yep. Because other councils also
take time to do that.
There are other councils who have this, you know, the same service measure in their annual reports. So I'll go check that. So the next read there is the RPS timeframes, and that was pushed out the way that they've split off the freshwater and the non-freshwater components. So we just can't meet the timeframe that was set. The annual plan for this year was set before we knew the outcome of the High Court. So we're working through that now. And the other red relates to the review of the regional air plan, and again this connects to that RPS measure. We've still got staff working through the RPS, so they haven't they're not available to focus on the air plan, and also it's been really difficult to recruit into the
across the board, but also into that planning space. So we're not going to be able to meet the target for this year with that regional air plan, but I understand work is initiated, but we just won't be as far progressed this year as we'd hoped. Any other questions or?
I mean, look, I can't help but say, we can focus on the three things that are in red, but this is an outstanding report. You've just explained, Jasmine, that we're on target almost across the board. We focus on this very closely, and well, you've just explained some of the reasons for those three challenges. None of those come as surprises to us because we're well aware of them. We've known about them. Anita's explained the issue around the policy work around air quality, and look, from my perspective, I'm really thrilled that the team is working as well as us, and that we're still on track on the vast majority of the KPIs which we report on in terms of our work program.
Richard.
I was going to say nearly the same thing at the same time, but I really like the service delivery highlights area of this report with exactly a whole heap more bullet points than the following page. And yes, some teamed out things there I've been noticing as well with the bombs from this council. I've been getting lots of feedback when I go out and about that people are seeing a lot more of us, a lot more good news stories, and noticing what we're doing more. So they can't quite put their finger on what it is, but they're seeing that as well. And yes, we're exceeding our targets in compliance monitoring and inspections and audits, and 6 new incident responders as well. So capacity to deal with pollution incidents if they occur, that's fantastic. Land and water plan with the stage 2 consultation and a heap of work going on in that space. More contact rec happening, which is important with this extremely hot summer as well. Getting into the area of land monitoring, which is really important as well, an area that we with soil monitoring sites established, haven't done that before. Yeah, and public transport patronage, which we talked about yesterday and was reported in the paper, but what an opportunity there. Even on reduced timetables, we're seeing fantastic numbers occurring and just indicating how important the public see that service. So that doesn't just happen. A whole heap of work has been going on behind the scenes to ensure that we're able to run as smoothly as possible and that people do want to take the buses. So they are. So that's great. So thanks, Tim. Yeah, some great stuff there.
So the overriding impression is that everything seems to be in order. We're performing just better than our plan at the 31st of December. Well, significantly better than the plan. And forecasts would indicate that we will be on plan by the end of the financial year. So I guess that's a summary. Are there any further questions? Otherwise, we will move on to the Treasury report, if we could.
I've just got one
Yep,
here, it probably is just on page 9, which is Q2 challenges, and that's around staff recruitment. And probably the final sentence, some areas are relying on contractors and all work has been pushed out until staff are recruited. Probably at some stage it would be good, whether that's an audit and risk or back to here, to understand where those work programs are at. I know, yeah, and what pressures that's actually creating on other staff. Because one part hasn't so much relies on others getting things done, and if we need some of the assistance from governance to fill a hole somehow, not to do the work, of course, but whether you need extra support there. So look, I did report yesterday in my chief executive report something which was slightly opposite from this, which was that I was so pleased that we're actually making real progress at recruiting staff. There's been a period of time where we had just as many people leaving as coming, and so we weren't making any progress. And as this report also states, at the end of Q1, we were 65 FTEs down on the 330 that we're supposed to be running at. And obviously, if you don't have all of your staff, sometimes there's work that has to be done and you have to use contractors or consultants. Sometimes that comes at a cost. That's, you know, at an increased cost over what it would have cost if we had our own employees. But however, we are moving in the right direction. I think my understanding, this report's the end of Q2, which is the end of December. We're now almost at the end of February, so another 2 months on. My understanding is from Amanda that we're down to about 30 FTEs short now. So we've gone from 65 to maybe 30. It's just really pleasing that we're attracting really good quality staff. We won't make appointments if the people aren't good appointments. And we've had challenges sometimes actually attracting anybody applying over the last 12, 24 months. And I think this is, some of this is partly because the economy is changing a bit, but some of it's also around the perception around ORC, which I think Gretchen just touched on actually. We're just doing a better job of getting some of our good news stories out and having people understand what we're doing, and it's helping, I think. And the culture of the organisation's always been strong, continues to be strong. So people enjoy working at ORC, and we're seeing less people leaving. So there's a lot of good news stories related to this, I have to say. But yeah, we're still down a bit on staff. You know, the areas that really challenge us, the policy space. We've had to use consultants in that space simply because we're trying to make progress on the land and water reform plan around the RPS. And the other areas where we have got shortages of internal staff, some of the time we wear those, we carry them. Other times we're able to bring in some contractors. But look, I'm really pleased that the overall impact on budget has been positive.
Thank you. Treasury.
Yeah. So in the Treasury report, you've got the 18-month monthly term deposits and on-demand funds. That's really our operating cash flow that we have for council that we can spend on our activities. There has been a reduction in that over the 18-month period. Well, yeah, and it goes up and down depending on when our cash is received in relation to our dividends, as well as when our cash is received in relation to rates. It is really, I suppose, the fact that we've budgeted for deficits. Obviously, that means that our cash flow over time is actually reducing a little bit, but we do have our funding with the LGFA that we would be looking at in the next month, drawing down some funding in order to make sure that we've got enough cash flow requirements for council for the rest of the year. We then have our managed fund, which the Treasury shows. So there's a graph beside that which shows how our managed fund is made up. So that is just the different elements of our managed fund. We have an investment arrangement where we outline what needs to be in the managed fund and what percentage of those elements need to be there. And the table below that graph just shows what that SIPO arrangement has as a range that's there and what our percentage is for the 31st of December. That is done monthly. We just show you the snapshot at 3 months to make sure that all of the requirements have been met. And then we do have a portfolio performance, and that shows the interest and dividends that those investments have made. Other is kind of fees, and occasionally there's a few other little income bits that come through on some shares, and we have the market value gain or loss. So last year our managed fund did take a bit of a hit at 30 June, which was just due to COVID. The share prices dropped quite a bit. That has started to recover. So you can see that we've actually made a gain in Q2. So hopefully that will continue for the rest of the year. But you did have JB Ware come and present, and JB Ware will be coming to present after 30 June on the full portfolio and performance and give you a very detailed update of what's in there at a portfolio level.
Yeah, Alan, you've got a question around this.
Thank you. I might know the answer. Look, that managed fund, I was going to ask if ethical investment considerations like, industries with a poor record on climate change, environmental damage or human rights were taken into account in decisions around that investment.
So at the moment, I don't think that is in our SIPO arrangement. So no, it is something that JB Ware are aware of, that we are a regional council. It is something that they discuss with us. But at the moment, there's no forced requirement
Right, okay, thanks. I guess I'm just signalling that I'll be seeking to have those issues considered at the appropriate forum, which might be the Audit and Risk Committee, or whether it's that presentation of JB Ware. Thank you.
Do we need to do anything to get that happening?
That would be, someone might know the answer better than me.
Well, I'm happy to ask the question of Nick.
Yep.
That the policy for investments, is it better that we highlight that to the motion to you? That we'd like to see that being looked at, or would that be a piece of work that you could do without a motion?
It's a piece of work that we'll potentially be doing anyway, because I think from memory, the SIPO is either coming up or not far away for due for review. I actually went back and had a look at, we actually had, trying to remember when it was, but we had JB Ware came down and presented to us a while back. I can't remember the exact date. They did a whole piece on ethical investing in there, and we were going to go away and look at that. And it's the issue is, or not the issue, but the consideration is, you know, do we actually incorporate it into the SIPO, or do we sit it outside? But they do have, the JB Ware have different things that they consider, that they just don't invest in anyway. But it doesn't get down into, if you like, the things that you mentioned, like environmental track record. They're not looking at. They are looking at things, you know, around weapons and various other things that they just don't invest in anyway. As a matter of course, that's theirs. But what we need to do is work out where we'll go as council. But I would think it's something that that you just push to Audit and Risk, who look after the SIPO and manage the relationship with the investment manager. And we could, if you pushed it from here to, and this is one of the benefits of the way meetings are structured this year, we've got finance now, these sort of things come up, we've got Audit and Risk in a month's time, you could push it onto the agenda there, and I can like put the previous material we'd had, and then Audit and Risk can have the discussion around, okay, where do we go from here, and get the process rolling, and that'll feed into a whole review of the SIPO and our investment policy.
So the question, going back to the question is, can it go on the agenda for the Audit and Risk, or do you want a motion to get it on the agenda for the Audit and
It's
Risk?
treated as an action from this meeting.
Yeah.
And put it on and get it.
Without a motion.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion.
No, that,
So-
and that's great. It's, and yeah, Andrew Douglas is really
Yeah.
familiar with those sort of investments. He worked in that area. Also, I'm delighted. I've certainly had those conversations with him.
No, it's noted as an
I had the
action.
numbers on the listening.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Any further questions? All right, well, I think we probably might have come to the end of the financial reporting. I guess you can now move on to the rate strike. We're talking about the same people?
Don't.
Oh, sorry, we have to do the move. Well, so what are moving that the reports be accepted?
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing?
It says notes of paper and activity.
Oh,
blah, blah,
okay,
blah.
yep.
It's in the recommendation on page 3. Active move.
Okay, well, that recommendation is moved by Kate. Second by Andrew, thank you.
Make a comment.
Yep.
Please. I concur with all the positivity about the report, and thank you, staff, for presenting it all. Just want to go back up. I know it's a trivial amount of money, but going back to the Alexandra flood scheme, I think it's more around principle. But if you think about an outstanding invoice for someone to essentially require it to be paid, and if you take an example of a ratepayer receives an OIC rate demand in September, and they get till the 31st of October to pay their rate bill, otherwise they get charged 10% of the rates. I just think it's bizarre that we allow a conversation, and I know perhaps we're being bullied, and I use the word perhaps, but it seems bizarre that we've got an outstanding account owed by Contact Energy, now halfway through the 22-23 year. And, you know, we're essentially carrying that, that liability because we're still going to maintain the flood scheme, as Nick alluded to. It would be fall upon us in terms of a liability if that flood scheme was not fit for purpose. I know it's only 150k that's outstanding, 149, but I think it's a principle that we need tidied up going forward. I know Richard's picked up and is going to follow it up with staff, etc. But I think if governance needs to rattle the cage, I think that's something that we could do to support staff. I won't say any more than that at this point, but I just wanted to flag.
So you're suggesting some stronger correct action?
Correct. But perhaps to hear from the staff where things are at before saying too much, because I don't want to derail progress that's been made for this financial year.
Okay, thanks. It's noted. Yeah. Okay, so we have the motion. It's been moved and seconded. So any further discussion around that? Okay, so we just put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, so how's the rate strike gone?
So this paper just outlines our rate strike that we did all the way back in the 1st of September. So rates notices are sent out on the 1st of September and due the 31st of October. We sent $54 million worth of rates, which is what was in our annual plan percentages that we needed. And there was a small increase in the number of total rates notices sent. That is just due to subdivisions. So obviously we have subdivisions, which does increase the number of ratepayers that we have by a small increment every year. We still had our collection percentage was slightly better than last year, but is really in line with that around low 80s, kind of 80% of people pay on time for our rates bill. That shows really in our penalty percentage as a percentage of total rates that were struck. There's a small increase by 0.14%, but it's really been in line over all of the previous periods. We did have that I just wanted to draw your attention to. So I did a program with customer services team, really to get some feedback from ratepayers on how the rates notice went and just some of the general inquiries that people were giving us, as well as perhaps improvements in customer services that they wanted. Some of that was in relation to our direct debits. So our direct debits have been set for quite a substantial amount of time, where we have an annual direct debit, or we have a triennial option where they can pay 3 times a year. So they pay on the 30th of June, the 28th of February, sorry, the 31st of October, the 28th of February and the 30th of June, so 3 instalments. Those direct debit options, we really are getting feedback from people that the amount to pay in that third option is just too high now that we've had an increase in our rates. So they would like us to move to a more frequent direct debit period. So we're looking at upgrading, which was going to happen anyway, our rating system that will enable us to do that. So we are actively trying to do that for this year's coming forward rate strike for this year. So we're looking currently at weekly, fortnightly and monthly, as well as annual. At the moment, we would keep the triannual option, but the triannual option, people forget that it's coming out because it's so irregular and doesn't match other payments. It's often difficult for them to remember to put the funds in their bank account. So we probably would look at feedback on the triannual after we've set up those other frequencies to look at potentially scaling that out, because it does have problems there. We also had from people that they would like a reminder for their rates. So we are setting up that we can do that in our email rates notice. So it's very expensive to post a notice out to people, just with the cost of postage and printing. But we are going to be offering people going forward a reminder if they receive their rates notice via email, so we can check that they haven't paid, and just to send them a little friendly reminder a couple of weeks before they're due, so that they hopefully, if they haven't received their notice or they've overlooked it, it is just a reminder for them. And we also had feedback from people, which was part of the 2002 community survey as well, about a rates brochure about what Otago Regional Council does. So we've started with the communication and marketing team. So they're going to be helping with that to make a brochure that will go out in this year's rates notice. So I'm just open to any questions.
I'm intrigued with the comments on the rates postage. And that Southland, I think, now email is preference, and they've really driven people to go to email. I don't know that we've done that. Are we looking at that as well?
We have looked in the past of doing that and included our rates application form in with rates notices in the past. The problem's been is that the feedback on those forms, that it's been a little bit difficult for people to sign up to it. We're going through with our IT department this year and redesigning the form online so that people can complete it online and really trying to simplify that. There will also be I think they're called a flip card that we were going to put with the rates notice in addition to the brochure, telling people that you can sign up to rates notices and telling them about, and on the other side, telling them about the new direct debit options, so that hopefully we can increase our number of rates notices emailed. That would be preferable for us. It's preferable from a cost basis as well as environmental, not putting that paper out into the environment.
And for us who digitally do accounts now, it's a lot better as well. Sorry? For those that do digital accounting now, it's much easier as well.
We do receive from people that the only thing they get in the mailbox is the ORC rates notice. So that email option has been available for a few years, but I do agree that uptake is something that we are going to try and promote this year.
People have to sign up.
They have to sign up.
Yeah, we can't, even if we know people's emails, we can't we can't opt that they have to sign up and they have to provide it. They have to agree to the terms that they will maintain it. Otherwise, we'd potentially end up that in the position under the Rating Act where we're deemed to have not sent it, and then it becomes our issue and you can't charge.
I totally understand all of those issues. What is, as someone who does some accounting at home, I have never seen anything that has indicated that I could do that.
Yeah.
And so it's that messaging that I'm not sure, and I don't necessarily open the envelope, so maybe something my husband's saying, but I haven't seen that you're doing that. And so I'm intrigued to see that you are, and how well that's been. Does anyone else know that you could do that? Because I'd be interested to know how well communication has been on it. Highlight.
Kevin.
Just interested on page 35, number 5, about the debt collection. Knowing that your mortgage demand is, we can do that. Why do we actually go? What costs are we incurring by going to third-party debt collecting agencies?
Sure. So our first preference is to collect overdue rates. So we're talking about arrears rates. So these have sat for more than 12 months. They're the previous year's rates that are owed that we can collect from mortgage collection. And it is our preference to collect that way. Because there's no fee apart from administration time. So it does take ORC staff time, and there's some postage costs in relation to notifying the ratepayer, notifying the bank, and then checking after the notice period whether the funds have been received for the rates, and then obviously repeating that notification period to then make a demand. So there is cost on ORC's side, but it is our internal cost. And when we go, it's our preferred method, but not everybody has a mortgage on their property. So obviously for properties that don't have a mortgage, then we need to go through another debt collection option.
Yeah, so there's no, so you don't know that figure that we're it's costing us each year. That doesn't matter. I understand you have no problem.
Okay, we're sort of rolling through time. Sorry, I thought this meeting was supposed to end at 11:30. It was, still 11:30.
Next one starts.
Okay, Gary, you've got a question.
Yep, I'll be really quick. The number 3 there on penalties, given that we have such or the past 3 or 4 years, such big increases in our rates, regularly raised with me how much of a shock it is on a regular basis when people receive their rates. But we sit with the luxury of 83% being paid basically by the due date. Do you think we'd see a substantial reduction in the penalty amount if we say extended the due or the penalty date by another month? So we would have a new policy of penalties wouldn't apply until the 1st of, say, December. Given that for some people, now the numbers have lifted beyond what was possibly quite minimal amount for them to pay to something they do now actually have to factor for and consider, but could pay over 2 months versus one?
Sure. So that's really why I'm proposing those changes to the direct debits. So feedback from people, we sent out our penalty notice and it did ask people to contact us and make an arrangements to pay. If a person had contacted us, even with a penalty notice with an arrangements to pay and paid what they could pay and paid that balance off, we would have waived that penalty. So those people that have contacted us that have financial problems would have had their penalty waived, assuming they stuck to their arrangement of paying us whatever they could afford weekly, fortnightly, monthly, whatever basis was agreed. And going forward, we would like to, I suppose, remove the requirement to ask us, because we do know that some people don't want to come and ask and say, I've got financial problems to pay this. And that's really what the direct debit option is, that they can just sign up online. It's available to everybody. They can sign up on whatever frequency they would like. The fortnightly one would be matched for the payments of MSD and pensions, so that it does have those ratepayers which receive those funds. It would come out after that, so that they've been able to receive that funding for them.
So I'll just add, what Sarah's saying is we're working with people who, you know, if they've got issues around ability to pay, and we're working with them. I think what you see here in the, you know, a large portion of the penalties are people who have no intention of paying. They haven't paid, they continue to not pay, and giving them an extra month isn't going to make any difference. But the people who ultimately, even of the ones who haven't paid by that 31 October, of which, you know, we've got direct debits, it's actually quite a small portion. And if they're in contact with us, the team, Sarah's team, is setting up arrangements to pay, and we've got the direct debit options there, and we want to modify those. So we think we can come up with some good options that you don't need to move the due date or the penalty date, because those people will all be catered for anyway.
Okay, just to wrap it up.
Yeah, just on that monthly, weekly, whatever payment you decide to do, because I'm having troubles. Is there going to be a cost to that? So
there is a cost in the fact that it takes administration of my staff to obviously run those direct debits, collect them, maintain them. So there are banking requirements that if we have a default of payment, we need to notify the person and then cancel that direct debit. We can't continue trying to take under a direct debit that's defaulted. So there's a higher administration of council, but there's no outside cost in banking fees. And it's really, I'm proposing that in feedback from what ratepayers are wanting. So I'm assuming that there'll be a saving on the arrangements to pay, because we currently have these people coming to us and saying, can I pay $5 a week every Thursday? And we're maintaining that, where they could go onto a direct debit and we could just be, you know, taking those funds through a direct debit. So hopefully it will end up neutral. But obviously, until we do that and we know the uptake, I'm not able to confirm that. But it's expected that administration time-wise, it will end up neutral.
right, so Sarah, but the reality is, if I change my rating to paying you fortnightly, as opposed to giving you my, I'd say my number, it's a reasonably big number for me. It is. So if I all of a sudden, instead of giving you say $5,000 now, I spread that over 12 months, I'm saving on interest, but you're actually losing interest. So are we putting anything into that?
So it's not really material, you know. For it depends, you know, if everybody changed to.
Well, that's what I mean.
But everybody's not going to. A lot of people are still quite happy, as we're seeing now. A lot of, for all the rates have gone up, a lot of people are just happy. The option's there for them to spread it over 3 payments, and yet it still consistently stays that 80 to 85% of the people all just pay in one hit on the due date. So for some people, that's just easier. They've already got it factored into all their cash flows, and that's what they do.
And we would be abnormal for a council not to offer those frequencies of direct
I'm happy you're doing it.
Yeah, so we are abnormal, not currently offering those.
I move to the committee notes report.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, Kate. So it was a noting report. So all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Well, thanks, Nick and Sarah. And also, Jasmine, Now, we just have one final item on the agenda. We can quickly do that. Richard, that would be good.
Just introduce Fred Doctor, who's our team leader, marketing communications, who has had significant input into this work. So very quickly, by way of background, given the time, during the long-term plan process 2 years ago, there was a motion passed by council for staff to investigate re-establishing some Otago Regional Council Environmental Awards in some form. We did not get that to council as part of the year 2 annual plan considerations, just due to capacity. We have delivered it as part of the year 3 considerations, but as you'll see in the recommendations, given the fiscal constraints of this year's annual plan, we're recommending the most appropriate thing should council wish to go forward with an awards program is to give us some guidance on the model that you prefer and for us to do more detailed work for proper consideration during the long-term plan process. And what I would say it's remiss of me in the options not to have included an option that says not to go forward. And also there's always an option for you to tweak the two options that I have included. So that should have been in there and it wasn't. Apologies for that. But essentially, there are 2 models that are established, and one of them is a more traditional awards function, if you like, and that's what a number of councils currently run, and there's details that have been included in the report and the attachments around those, or there is more of a community-based bi-monthly program, and that has been used in Northland previously, although they've now transitioned through to an annual awards process as well. It does speak to the community survey, and there is a good alignment with that in terms of ORC building its brand and becoming more well-known, engaging with those groups who are undertaking good work in our community and providing some support. It comes with a cost and potentially, that perception of is council focusing its spending in the right areas, and that's the balance that councillors would need to consider if you were going to ask us to bring something back to the long-term plan. So there's a very quick summary. Happy to answer questions.
2 questions. The first one is, and just you note the Balanced Farm Awards, of which we're a sponsor. What is the quantum that we put in there? Do you know?
We have been a sponsor previously. There was a decision made a couple of years ago for us to withdraw sponsorship. So
we're not.
I don't think we have in the last year.
Yeah, no, it's just okay. It's just whether we've got a budget item already in there that we could either, and whether your thinking was that we'd transfer that.
Yeah, so there's no dedicated sponsorship budget currently.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I'm intrigued that you used the word Northland transitioning, and was wondering whether we should be looking at a transitioning mechanism, because whether we actually do something.
Well, we would be transitioning from nothing to something.
Yeah, but whether we use the small approach just to get things going, and then look at the transitioning and use that as an opportunity to consider how we do it. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's no, that's good. I just
I think this is a neat idea. I mean, it really is, but I also think it's hard to justify spending in the current scenario, and some will see it as a nice to have. So we have to somehow look to, and you've listed the benefits and things there and the possible criticisms, but I kind of feel that there's the benefit of bringing people together for things like this are really important. And I'm not sure exactly how to tie it to cost savings elsewhere just yet, but I might think about that one for a bit. But I'm also wondering if it comes down to actually doing things as when we go out into the regions for our council meetings occasionally, to tie things in with that, so we can bring people together in their regions and not expect them to come to Dunedin for an award ceremony or anything like that. But I just wondered if there's something small that we can start with to be starting to recognise their work and the value of their work to our outcomes.
And I guess that, and I know it's a difficult thing to do on the spot, but that's effectively the guidance we need to put a paper with the right level of detail for councillors to be able to make a decision. Ideally, we would have an idea about a preferred model.
Yeah,
and
I don't think we need to be rushing too fast with this, but I do think that if we can arrange some sorts of events in regions tied to when we're there anyway,
so
bringing
that
people
would-
together and showing them how important they are to our work.
I think that's sort of the nature of the recommendation that it
It
goes
is.
to the CE. to
Yeah,
look
but
at this further.
yeah.
So any further? Oh, Gary, yes.
Thank you. Very quickly, from my perspective, I'd be prepared to support it. I think it's a good opportunity to acknowledge good work in the community. It sort of got a bit counterproductive when you were looking at the manner, like on an annual basis, that makes sense. To have to spend 15 to 20 grand on a rather lavish sort of awards night seemed to me to be actually money that would be far better spent on the award or within the award, or I think there would be a far more discreet but public way to be able to do it without having to go to that sort of lavishness. So, but like it has been said already, we are under a lot of pressure, and a lot of financial pressure and staff pressure. So, happy to consider it and maybe the upcoming long-term plan, and or maybe it needs to be deferred a wee bit longer and more thought put into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. So Richard.
I wanted to move the
good.
recommendations. I'll just speak briefly because it was an initiative that I put forward at annual planning time, which isn't always the best idea for a council to bring something forward at that time. But staff have responded to that. I feel strongly that we should be doing something in this space. And to be honest, I'm quite agree that it should be the smaller local heroes type approach that doesn't cost the world to coordinate, because those big events do cost a lot, and bringing sponsors and all that sort of thing takes a lot of work in the background. But hey, I think we should talk about this because there are opportunities there as well of working with other key stakeholders and partners perhaps, and there's more to it than just, what is the investment going to buy us? So let's talk about it at LTP is really my point. Yep.
Thank you for moving that.
Can
Do we
I
have a
just
second?
clarification,
Oh, yeah,
so the resolution or the recommendations included in the report were option 1, which is the award. So you're saying option 2, Gretchen?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yeah.
Which is the smaller community award.
I've just got a couple of comments, thanks. I've written down here, I think simple recognition awards. So I'm very much a community-based person. I think we don't need to have a very big hoo-ha. I don't like the idea of people having to nominate themselves or do a big presentation or sell themselves. I like the idea of us recognising local heroes or people in the community and pretty much nearly surprising them with an award, which would be a simple award. It might be a smoko and something towards their project. That's the way I see it. And over time we could build, and it's just, if we could build the bigger ones perhaps, but I prefer to have it at that level. And again, and you want to go to the Dad and Dave doing good things over there, as well as the big project over here, because they're both equally important. So, but you don't want to put them against each other.
Okay, so just some clarification around the options. What you had in the option 1?
Yep, so we're hearing option 2 has been moved.
We're replacing option 1 with option 2.
Yes.
Okay, so do we all know what option 2 is?
Small scale.
So that's my question.
Regular.
The fact that if we put option 2 in here, it isn't going to mean necessarily that the councillors are going to be doing it, because I have some issues with that, but I don't,
So all this is doing is directing the report you will receive as part of long-term plan considerations. This is not to be delivered in the 23-24 financial year.
Okay, understand.
I suggest I support option 2, but can we just remove bi-monthly? So it just leaves it. Open.
That's good.
That's a discussion that we probably need to have.
Okay. That's good. Okay, so the recommendation.
Option 2, community awards.
Yep. The recommendation with those changes has been put. You've moved that, Gretchen. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Alan. Any further discussion? Kevin?
The only thing with that really regular one, I'm really happy with that approach, but it is just all of a sudden the staff, how we structure that within staff, that all of a sudden we haven't got one person tied up full time chasing down.
So that'll be in the report. That'll be in your report to consider. We'll break down staff time, external costs, and anything else.
Yeah.
And we did get to taking bi-monthly out, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Right, that's carried. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance.
It was a nice assessment. Thank you too. Thank you.